Now this weekend's video has already gone out, which was a video on the R9 Nano, which for some reason is going up to stupid prices, and I wanted to get hold of one, mostly for myself for benchmarking older hardware, but it was also interesting to see how well this is holding up in 2025, and how it's only modern game engines that are actually causing this thing to become a little bit redundant. So I figured, why not look at something on the other end of the spectrum? Because that was quite expensive, that graphics card. So instead, I bought this off eBay. It is a £1.75 graphics card that I only bought because I found the listing picture funny. I'll probably throw it up now. It was just a motion blur filled picture of a graphics card and a description that said, lightly used GPU. So why don't we find out today if we can get another £1.75 bargain. I've also just seen part of the graphics card is poking through the packaging. So I don't even know if this thing survived. But why don't we find out? So there it is, the £1.75 graphics card. I mean, the packaging is not fantastic, but at the same time, no one selling a graphics card for £1.75 is ever going to package it well. I think this was listed as an R7 240X, which to my knowledge isn't actually a card that even exists. So let's get this thing open, find out what we've actually got. It's a little bit stuck, and here it is, our graphics card. So it's a Sapphire, it is very basic, there's more packaging left on the card. It's not too dirty, and it is indeed an R7 240 1GB, not GDDR, DDR3, PCIe, HDMI, DVI-D, VGA with boost. What does boost mean? So yeah, DDR3 memory, GCN1, low-end tier display adapter, but it might actually work, so let's plug it in, let's find out what it actually does. This should be relatively easy. Plug the card in. It is turned on, I just don't know if... Oh, there we go, yeah, we got a display. That's exciting. 28nm Sapphire. It is GDDR3. That's good. It says that we've got drivers. Video controller VGA. You know what? I care so little about this graphics card, we will see if that runs Valley. Right, that's not looking the worst. Let's run DDU. Give us some drivers. So we do in fact have drivers on here. I don't think the R7 240X came with anything exciting. It does offer GPU tuning though. Restart PC. Carry on overclocking. Right, throw it through 3D Mark, on with the rest of the video. So it is worth noting that we got through 3D Mark absolutely fine. And you probably noticed from my tone in this video that I don't find the R7 240 very exciting at all, because it really isn't an exciting card. I mean, they do have a bit of history to them, but mostly because, you know how the GT 1030 DDR4 is a scam? Like, some people will buy one thinking it's a better card because it comes with more VRAM than the other and things like that, a topic I've brought up quite a lot recently. Well, for some reason, the R7 240 was AMD's version of doing that 10 years ago. And lots of people forget, see, they sold this thing at the same price as higher tier cards, especially here in the UK. And, well, let's talk about some history a little bit before we actually get on with the rest of the video. Long story short from this segment though, we made it through 3D Mark absolutely fine. So just what was the R7 240? Not that I plan on giving much of a history lesson on this, but if we're going to test one we might as well get something out of it. Generally, they were released back in 2013, they've got 384 shaders, and most people see them as a rebrand of AMD's HD 7730. But not quite, they use a different GPU core, they're very similar. These are usually worse, because they came with DDR3, or in this case GDDR3, and some variants did actually get GDDR5, but good luck finding one. See, the main issue is although it's not a bad card, you can see it's running Morrowind here, which isn't exactly intensive, it is a low-purpose display adapter. But it fell into the common trap of 2012 and 2013, where they would sell a version of this card with 2 to 4 gigabytes of VRAM, usually very slow VRAM, and sell it at the same price, if not more, than the higher tier cards. So my main remembrance of these cards is them selling because people thought they were getting something better than they were. See, it was up against things like the R7 250, I haven't got an R7 250 on hand, I've got an R7 350, but you get the main idea, very similar card. This is better in every way. But this sold for the same price as that, And these usually sold better because they came with more RAM. At least over here in the UK, you'd always see these in the top sellers on Amazon, eBuyer, anywhere you wanted to look for a graphics card back in the 2013 to 2015 era. So they've not exactly got a great reputation, but now they are very much like these. They're in the bargain bin. So you could get an R7 350 for £2, you can get an R7 240 for £1.75. These things are more or less relegated to the bin. The only difference is this one arrived working and this one didn't, so this one gets points for that. Really, the R7 240 shouldn't have lingered on as long as it did, but they were releasing variants of this very graphics card right up until about 2018 with the R5 430 and the R5 430 OEM Plus, which was a weird OEM variant. They're not very interesting, there's not much to them, but we want to know how they perform in the benchmarks. Starting off the benchmarks, we have Grand Theft Auto 5 with the Enhanced Edition, which caught me off guard because I wasn't actually expecting it to work. I was expecting to have to go back to the original version. But it was nice to see that with normal settings in 690p, is that? 630p? Either way, 720p with the 0.875 times preset for frame scaling, we were able to see 31 FPS on average. This could of course go lower when there was lots going on, specifically when you're in large police chases you'd be seeing around 24 to 25 FPS on average, but overall Grand Theft Auto 5 Enhanced Edition was just about playable, and if you wanted it to be more stable you could always drop the frame scaling some more. Next up was Counter-Strike 2, which we now had to run with low settings in 480p, which is worth keeping in mind. This card was originally sold to play Counter-Strike Go in 720p with medium and high settings at usually around 100 FPS back in the day. So it's interesting to see that although Counter-Strike 2 is playable, you are looking at a much lower resolution and the absolute bare bones settings to get it playable. It's worth noting that this benchmark is a worst case scenario, so you could see slightly higher than this in competitive scenarios, but really, playing anything competitive on this card is probably well in the past. With BeamNG, it is always a fun one to benchmark because it is remarkably scalable, and it does actually look okay with the low settings and lower resolutions. But in the jungle benchmark, we were seeing 27 FPS on average with 23 FPS 1% lows, and this was stable enough to be considered playable, but really in these types of maps and these types of situations, you should probably play with the absolute lowest of settings, which really does make the game look pretty terrible. But then again, when you are playing on simpler scenarios like the Giant Hill, this would spring right back up to 60 FPS if you were keeping with the same settings. So BeamNG is playable, you're just better off considering what maps and scenarios you're going to actually want to play on it. Mountain Blade Bannerlord once again proving it is the pinnacle of optimization, as I was planning on originally going back and testing Warband on a card like this, but lo and behold, Bannerlord will run on a £1.75 R7 240, provided you use the lowest settings, but you can still retain a 720p resolution. It's worth noting the benchmark is reminiscent of the mid to late game, so realistically, in the early game you could actually enjoy the game with some slightly higher settings if you really wanted to. But for the sake of stability, you're probably better off playing this game on a better graphics card really, but if you are to sticking with this one, then it is just about playable with these settings. And to give people that don't know what the R7 240 is a bit of an idea of how it performed back in the day, we have Skyrim Anniversary. So if you went out and spent £50 on your brand new graphics card and you didn't buy the older HD 7750 or HD 7770 or the slightly better than this R7 250, and you decided I want more VRAM, which isn't even something we've got here, we've really got a bare bones one here, you'd be looking at 720p with low settings in games that had just come out. So Skyrim Anniversary was playable, and Towns and Cities didn't actually change our frame rate too much, but you were talking 47 FPS on average, which could drop down to just over 30 FPS when there were big battles or fights going on. However, one thing they did always do rather well was source games, so we have Gary's mod here, and rather than just running it in 1080p, I figured, you know what, I've got a 1440p monitor hooked up, I wonder if it can manage it in high settings at that resolution. And it can just about, even with its minuscule 64-bit memory bus, manage Gary's mod with high settings in 1440p. Now we were talking around 38 FPS on average, which could just about drop under 30 FPS. Keep in mind we are running a Half-Life 2 map here, which is not exactly common for Gary's mod, so this is a bit more intensive than it should be. So yeah, Gary's mod runs fine in 1440p, which did actually catch me off guard. Now, Fable Anniversary isn't a game I like to benchmark because it is in most ways a worse version of the game, and it also has a few issues introduced that are unique to Unreal Engine, and this isn't one I've ever seen before, where the only thing we could actually see was sort of the world compressed into a small ball in the corner, which isn't something you often see when you play Fable. The good news is, if you go back to the real version of the game with the Lost Chapters, you could play the game in high settings in 1440p once again, and you'd still see over 40 FPS on average, which would drop to around 35 to 39 FPS when there was lots of NPCs and lots of things that had to be drawn on screen. So Fable and those types of classic games will run absolutely fine, but the version that came out when this card was being sold, it doesn't run properly at all. Now, the amount of people I know that had one of these graphics cards and were trying to play PUBG on it back when it became big, it's quite a large number, genuinely. These graphics cards caught quite a few people out, and they've managed to go forgotten somehow. They've managed to almost get away with it. But even now, with DirectX 12, which I found really does help these older GCN cards, well, we were talking the lowest settings with DirectX 12 in 504p, and we'd still be seeing around 26 FPS on average. This could spike up out of nowhere for some reason, and would then go straight back down to 26 FPS, which I'd imagine is likely to be doing with the VRAM or something like that on the card. I really don't care enough about the R7 to investigate it. But there we go, PUBG, I wouldn't call this playable, and this is about the same as it used to run back in the day. But finally, can it run Crysis? And miraculously, using the high settings across the board in 720p, you could actually see over 30 FPS a lot of the time. Now, don't get me wrong, when you were actually in combat and lots was going on, you were more likely to be seeing around 24 to 28 FPS. But the thing is, it did look relatively good because you've got the 720p resolution and the higher settings, so Crysis is actually remarkably playable on what is a £1.75 graphics card. Yes, we've seen it perform better on graphics cards that are around the same price or cheaper, but I can't help but find it almost admirable that this graphics card with a really quite rancid reputation actually handles Crysis somewhat okay. So there we have it. AMD's R7 240, now a £1.75 graphics card. And it's not like I'm going to go and say, go out and buy one of these, because let's be honest, when you are shopping in the sub £3 part of the market, it is entirely random what you'll get. So, has the R7 240 redeemed itself? Well, to a degree, at this price, it is a very capable retro graphics card with relatively okay final drivers that will handle most things up to about 2012 absolutely fine, and then anything from after its release just about okay with lower settings. I mean, I wasn't expecting Crysis to run at all this well, and I wasn't expecting GTA 5 Enhanced Edition to be playable at all, so it is still hanging in there. It's just a shame that we find these cards trying to fight against a reputation that they earned for being bad purchases that are now somewhat okay purchases because they are now £48 lower. That was a really lengthy and wordy way of trying to put this. But what I'm trying to say is, the R7 240 at the prices they're going for now, I mean, you can grab them with a 2-year warranty from CEX. In fact, not even that, a 5-year warranty from CEX, about £7.50 when they get these in stock. So if you're really in a pinch for a graphics card that's cool, quiet, doesn't exactly need anything, and can give a 1440p display if it needs, then maybe it's not the worst thing in the world. But at the end of the day, sub £2 graphics card, and we can do some modern gaming. So I've not really got much else to say than that. This is one of those videos that I thought it's better off making it this afternoon, because otherwise I'm simply never going to get round to it. So the moral of the story is, unless you actively want one of these, probably don't bid on one because you find the picture funny. But there you go. I hope you all enjoyed watching, thank you very much, and good night.